Tales from the wild. Stories from the heart. A journey into the mind and soul of fired-up business professionals where they share their vision for the future. And hear from a different non-profit organization every month as they create awareness of their goals and their needs. Dive into a world of untamed passion as we join our host, Shireen Buerta, for this month's episode of Friends from Wild Places.
Right. Welcome. Shireen here, your virtual bookkeeper. Let me give you the gift of knowing the reasons behind keeping your business and personal finances separated. 1, take advantage of tax deductions and benefits. 2, protect your assets from legal liability. And 3, establish a business image and credibility. If you want to know more, why don't you give your business the best gift yet and hire SBS today? More than just a bookkeeper, go check me out at www.shireensbookkeeping.com and allow me to keep your books clean so you don't have to. Shireen's Bookkeeping Services, your bookkeeper for the future. Well, welcome back. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. You are listening to Friends from Wild Places with myself, Shireen Buerta, and my amazing co-host and mortician, Tanya Scotece. Tanya, what is news in the funeral industry today?
Oh, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. So funeral industry updates. So they're trying to incorporate some of the AI, artificial intelligence into our industry with the use of, kind of perpetually memorializing somebody. So it has its own, I'm not going to say anomaly, but it's like QR codes with headstones, memorialization, almost like time capsule kind of things for the deceased. So that's what we've been experiencing on the funeral side.
That's a little bit interesting. Right. So we're excited, audience and listeners, because we have someone very special to introduce you today. I wonder if you heard about the former priest who evolved into an executive and now focuses work on your mission connector. Well, that person is real, and our guest today, Brian G. Bachand, founder of Evolution. Yes, its name is twice, on purpose to help you and organizations evolve from confusion to clarity through an authentic approach to create conscious change in a spirit of joy. Welcome, Brian. It's so good to have you here.
It's a pleasure. Great to be here with you, Shireen and Tanya, and also with your audience today. Thanks so much for the warm invitation.
We're so happy to have you and looking forward to this amazing podcast.
So everyone knows that Tanya and I have a real passion when it comes to true crime. So once again, we are going to do our normal little icebreaker where we love to talk about either crimes that are happening right now as we speak, or crimes that are interesting to us from the past. So today, we just want to talk about a specific one from the past where the Archdiocese of Boston sex abuse scandal was part of a series of Catholic Church sexual abuse cases in the United States that revealed widespread crimes in the American Catholic Church. In early 2002, the Boston Globe published results of an investigation that led to the criminal prosecutions of 5 Roman Catholic priests and thrust the sexual abuse of minors by Catholic clergy into the national spotlight. Another accused priest who was involved in the spotlight scandal also pleaded guilty. The Globe's coverage encouraged other victims to come forward with allegations of abuse, resulting in numerous lawsuits and 249 criminal cases. Ultimately, it became clear that priests and lay members of religious orders in the Catholic Church had sexually abused minors on a scale such that the accusations reached into the thousands over several decades. A major aggravating factor was the actions of the Catholic bishops to keep these crimes secret and to reassign the accused to other parishes in positions where they had continued unsupervised contact with youth, thus allowing the abusers to continue their crimes. Brian was a priest during this time. So, Brian, tell us a little bit about your experience and how it affected you.
Sure. So I was a priest for the Archdiocese of Boston. I was ordained at 27, and I have to say I had such a positive experience when I went through the seminary. And I was sent to a beautiful parish west of Boston for my first assignment, and it was amazing. I was also there in 2001 when September 11th happened, and I remember being in the parish as a young priest, just about a year and a half ordained. And when that happened, the church was packed with so many people because we were in Boston. There was such a connection with Boston and New York during that time. And literally a year later, just about, that is when the sex abuse scandal erupted, just like you said, like that famous movie that, came out, Spotlight, which I'm sure so many people have seen. And I remember reading that in the newspaper, hearing it on the news. And as a young priest in the parish, I was learning at the same time. And it was something that was really jarring because I didn't know many of the names. And it was hard. Like, I was trying to process information as my parishioners were as well. And I have to say, I had not been exposed to that when I was in the seminary or even as a priest. And many of the priests that I knew who were ordained with me, they were in a very different place. Like, we were like, wow, like what was happening? And you raised a very good point. Part of the big issue were the bishops and the way decisions were made. And that was where a lot of anger was coming. And that's where a lot of anger was coming with priests, of saying like, why was this happening? So when I was in the parish, I have to say I felt very loved by the people, and I felt very supported by the people. And I think people saw me as this young priest that, didn't like, wow, like we believe in you, we love you, we hope this doesn't tarnish, where you are at. And so fast forward a couple of years later, the Cardinal Archbishop of Boston, Cardinal Law at the time, he did resign. He resigned because of the way the scandal was handled. And a new cardinal came to town, Cardinal Sean O'Malley, and he was brought in as a healer. He was brought in to bring restitution. And he made it very clear the day he was installed, like, I am here to bring healing. I'm here to make challenging decisions, and the victims come first. And he also cleaned house in terms of administration. And I received a phone call on a Thursday night from one of the assistant bishops asking if I could come in for a meeting. And he said, oh, everything's great. We want to speak to you about an opportunity. And that's when I was told that the new cardinal had selected me to be his new private secretary, which is like chief of staff. And it was such a gift because I had no idea that I was being selected for that. But I was there to help support him as he met with victims, as he made challenging decisions, as he had to go to Rome and meet with the Pope and share about what was happening and trying to bring healing. And it was such a gift to be part of that healing aspect and supporting him. And I think, just to summarize, you have a passion about crime. Yeah, there were crimes that were committed. I think one of the greatest crimes that may not be persecuted in a legal system is when there is broken trust, when that is the greatest crime that I think really is something that can be repaired, but it is something that is very hard. And I think that was one of the greatest crimes. But at the same time, I think it opened up a sense of transparency and a sense of openness. Still a long way to go, in my opinion, on certain issues in certain areas. But I really believe that was kind of the crack that opened things up, and still a long way to go for many. But that was my nutshell version, but I'm happy to expand if you have other questions.
Sure. I think when that happened, it broke a lot of people's hearts and it broke a lot of people's faith in the Catholic Church, because I think the Catholic Church was put on a massive pedestal and we all looked up as, you know, it's quite a religious, I don't know if this word sect is the correct word to say, but there were quite a large part in the different types of religions that are out there. And when it comes to the Catholic Church, it is just so interesting how much faith people lost and the realization of, you know, they're only human. These are human beings just like you and me. And just like you could find pedophiles in every sort of business, inside families, outside families, you can find it in the Catholic Church as well.
I have a question though, in the meantime for Brian, while we'll recap with you, Shireen, in a second. Brian, it's fascinating because I grew up Roman Catholic in Connecticut, born and raised in Hartford. So I just have, you know, for our listeners out there, what was your journey to become a priest? You know, like, was it a moment in time, or was it, you know, like your upbringing, how you as a person in your family, I don't know, do you decide to become a priest, or how does that happen? Like,
yeah, that's a great question. That could be a whole podcast, and I've certainly spoken about that, but that's a brilliant question. So, you know, I think for me, I grew up as the youngest of 5 children. I was a huge surprise. There's 16 years between myself and the oldest. I was born into a Catholic family, but you know, we went to church on Sunday. It was funny. We never said grace before meals or any of those things that you think like Catholic household will do. But we went to church. The one thing that was different was God or faith was spoken about at home. Like if, let's say I was nervous about a test at school or something, I remember my mom saying, well, you know, say a prayer, you know, you do your part, you do your best, you know, but, you know, ask God to guide you, etc. And I really believe, you know, now I look back and I was always just very spiritual. I think as a child, I was just very, there was just a deeper sense of connection, the way I connected to people, the way I felt situations. And I think because I grew up in Catholicism, because you had that inclination for spirituality, it was like, well, you become a priest. You know, now I realize that it isn't the case. But I went to university. I went to a regular undergrad university in the Midwest. It was a Catholic university that was great and had fun and studied overseas and, you know, got a degree in communication. But I was involved with the Catholic kind of chaplaincy at the university. And I remember my senior year, there was a retreat that was being offered. It was an advertisement for anyone that thought they might have like maybe the thought about a vocation. There was a retreat and I went on that retreat. And it really, like, really affirmed and made me feel that, wow, I want to explore this further. It wasn't like I left that retreat and like, oh, like, I'm done, like, sign me up. Like, I just knew it was the right next step was to apply to the seminary after I graduated. And then I went through, you know, about 4 months of interviews. I mean, psychological testing, reference testing, you know, academic background testing, panel interviews. And at 20, what was I, 21, 22? I mean, that's a lot to go through and they really weed out. And then I was accepted. So then I knew the right next step was to begin year 1. And every year I was evaluated and it was a sense every year became, wow, this was good. I see how I'm growing. I would like to continue. This is great. So when it came time to be ordained, there was a sense, it's like it's no different than a relationship. Like when you're dating someone, you're like, wow, okay, like I think we have things lined up, you know, the best they can be. Now it's taking that next step. And my father was really beautiful. I always remember he said to me, he said, there is no shame upon you if you ever decide to leave. And he said, because it is not an easy choice. And he said, you know, it can be beautiful, but he said, if you're not going to be in with all your heart in doing it, it's better to step away. And so for me, it was just one affirmation after another. But then when I became a priest, that's where I kept evolving. That's where my heart began to open. I loved being a priest. I have to tell you, like, I loved being in the parish. I loved the parishioners. I still hear from many of them. I felt like I was a priest in Vegas. Like, I did so many weddings. Like, I was like the wedding priest. And I think it was because the pastor I lived with used to tell me, he used to call me Junior. He was very funny because he was older. He said, "Hey, listen, Junior, the only reason you're doing these weddings is because you're young, you look good in the pictures." But like, I loved it because it was a joyful moment. But I think being a young priest is also where my heart began to open up. And I think I was a late bloomer in terms of accepting myself and what it meant to be a gay man, and wanting to be able to love another person, and coming to terms with that. And I think I was obviously being groomed for a lot of leadership as a young priest when I went to the Cardinal. And I realized it was such a powerful gift of the universe to show me I could bring my gifts, I can stand in my truth, and I can bring that to the world in a new way. And I'm so grateful I listened to that. And I'm so grateful that for me personally, even in light of our earlier discussion of many of the horrible things I've seen, I also saw tremendous beautiful things as well in the lives of people and what took place. But I'm very happy to be where I am now. And I'm grateful for the training, having been a priest. So that's it in a nutshell. There's a lot there, but that's to answer it. And it gives a sense. It was a very human experience. I think that's the thing I want people to know. It was a very human experience of going through the seminary, having doubts, incredible academic formation. Every year you had an assignment. The first year they sent me to the women's state prison in Massachusetts at 22 years old. And I found out later that they give that assignment to the ones that they want to test the most, because it's a hard assignment. And I loved it. And so much so that I continued on even through the seminary and as a priest. And I started a program when I was in the parish to bring parishioners to the women's prison as well. So it was incredible. I did hospice work, dealing with AIDS patients. They sent me to South America for a summer and did mission work. So I was tested and tried, and I went into it with an open heart. But I'm also grateful that my heart didn't close upon ordination, and I kept really being open to where the spirit of who I am was leading me.
Wow, that's beautiful. What a beautiful story, and just, in sharing, your personal journey with us. So two things that just come to mind as you were saying. So one is when you mentioned that you were being tested, and they have this assignment at the women's prison in Massachusetts. What was the reason, in your opinion, that was like the hardest, not hardest, but one of the most trials and of times? For example, like, why not a male prison? Why, like, what is it about females in prison that was there to test you?
So every year in the seminary, there's different programs that you're part of. Like every year you have a kind of a work that you're doing as well. So there were male prisons that seminarians were sent to as well. That was in a couple years ahead. For my first year, the assignment was the women's state prison. They had a very long relationship with the sister who ran the chaplaincy there. She's still there. She's incredible. And, they selected myself and one other seminarian to go there because, any prison, whether it's male or female, I think is going to be a very challenging assignment. So for me, it was the only prison assignment that was available that year. And it's tough. I mean, they selected me and the other person I went with, I think because our life had been a little more sheltered. I grew up in a very comfortable environment, family-wise, well-educated, had kind of a plum of a life, and then all of a sudden I'm in the seminary at 22, and I think they want to say like, hey, like, here are some individuals who have had some very challenging situations. And they wanted to see, like, do you have the internal stamina? Do you have the ability to listen, to grow? And I don't think it really mattered that it was a women's prison or a men's prison. I think dealing with prison is challenging. And it really, the gift for me was seeing those individuals with the eyes of love and seeing them. These women were beautiful, that many of them learning their stories, that circumstances oftentimes beyond their control are what brought them there. Meeting a woman that had killed her husband, she was part of our group, but because of the abuse and the horrific abuse that had gone on, meeting women that, unfortunately came from economic situations that they couldn't afford a lawyer, and because they didn't speak English that well, they were in prison. The separation of parents and children, it was incredible. And so for me, at 22, Mr., all like out of university, all in here, they were my teachers. And that is what just opened me up, that it just made me realize I loved it. And in many ways, it wasn't about going in and to show them or teach them. It was more about bringing your presence, your love, your openness, because that is the essence of human connection.
Yeah.
And that was the gift I took out of that.
Yeah, no, I truly appreciate your words as far as, your sharing. And where did you actually grow up? I know you said university and things at the Midwest, but where?
Yeah. So I'm a Boston guy. So I grew up in
Okay.
Boston, but I grew up on the North Shore of Boston, and then did my undergraduate in the Midwest, and then came back to Boston.
Awesome. Awesome.
But what I'm very intrigued with this whole conversation, Brian, is the quote of the day, which is a quote that you provided us, is "You have nothing to lose and everything to gain." And with a little bit of your story that you've shared with us today, I think that is so applicable. And you acted that out through and through. So what does that mean to you, this quote?
I think that quote, I love that quote. Nothing to lose and everything to gain it is about being open. And to me, it's a very spiritual quote, although I think it came from Steve Jobs, who I think, it was, but it really is about being open, that, it's about that sense that when opportunities come or you meet someone, oftentimes our logical minds or where we are will want to say, no, I can't do that. Or I've already made this decision, or I don't have the resources to go on this. Or, you get invited to go to something. And it's like, well, it's already too late. I need to get home. Sometimes you have nothing to lose by being open. You have nothing to lose by maybe going and seeing what's there. And you may have everything to gain. And for me, I look back at my life of when I was at a moment, working with the Cardinal, we're in Rome. There were some things that were coming my way about, some new opportunities. And I realized I don't want to live this way. I come to terms, I'm like, I was a late bloomer. I accept who I am in my heart. And I'm not going to live in these two worlds. The glamour of a golden cage isn't attractive to me. You know what I mean? And I had nothing to lose by saying and going to work with a therapist to say, I think I may want to leave the priesthood. And I had everything to gain by standing in my truth. And so that quote just means everything to me. And that's how I live.
Tune in next week for part 2 from Friends from Wild Places.
You've been listening to Friends from Wild Places with Shireen Bueta. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast from the links to catch every episode and unleash your passion.